Good afternoon, big bankers. Hooray! I've never had an introduction like that, so thank you very much. Mission Possible. It's fabulous to be here with you all this afternoon, and I'm very much looking forward to spending a little bit of time with you, sharing some stories, sharing some ideas about Mission Possible. Now, I've been sitting here in the audience with you today, and I've already been hearing about the incredible things that you've all been achieving together as a team. So I want to get a little bit interactive. So I'd like you to all feel incredibly proud of what you've achieved so far. And I'd like to do that by the stamping of the feet, please, because I know that's a thing here. Let's hear those feet stamping. There we go. All right, amazing. So look, truly amazing stuff that you're doing, and I can also see how well poised you are for the future. Hearing the stories, hearing about where you're going, for me, someone who thrives on missions that everybody says are impossible, and to really focus on how do you make that go and achieve that is very exciting for me to hear your stories and where you're going. So what I'd like to do is, share some stories, share some ideas, share some insights, and to get a little bit interactive as we go through our time today. Let me very quickly tell you a little bit about my background and why I talk about taking on impossible goals. What you can see on the screen here, at the age of 28, I was lucky enough to join what was called the world's toughest yacht race. A yacht race around the world. And basically, the whole idea, it was ordinary people doing extraordinary things. 18 people on each boat, 12 identically matched boats, the vast majority of who had never sailed before. We had to come together. We had to learn how to work together as a team to tackle the world's toughest oceans. We saw hurricanes. We saw icebergs. We saw 100-foot waves. And the only thing that made a difference between first place and last place was how we worked together as a team. So I want to draw some stories and ideas from that in terms of how do you face your Mission Possible. However, once around the world was not enough for me. So in 2014, I went around the world a second time, this time with this team here. It was my wife and our 3 children under the age of 10. Lots of people said, it's impossible. There's absolutely no way you can do that. We had 5 years of preparation and then 2 years of actually making that happen. And that started to show me what is possible when you really put your mind to it, when you develop the teamwork to be able to go and make those challenges happen. It also, by the way, showed me the very powerful parallels between our work lives and our home lives. I believe that all of us are building 2 teams, a work team and a home team. And it's exactly the same set of skills that we need to thrive in both areas. So I'm going to be drawing out some insights from that as we go through. Outside of that, in my working life, I spent 10 years working in financial services, so in banking, and also as an entrepreneur. And since coming back from my last adventure, my obsession has become how do you go and take on big, bold goals? And I believe that's all about the mindset. How do we think differently? And that journey has taken me around the world over the last 7 years to study, to interview, to research some of the world's most impressive leaders, people who go and take on those challenges, which everybody else says there's no way you can go and do that. And there are patterns, there are clues that all these leaders leave behind. And I'd like to share some of those with you today. This is Michelangelo. I love his quote where he says, the greatest danger is not in setting our aim too high and missing it. It's setting our aim too low and actually achieving it. So therefore, I'm always thinking, how can we push the boundaries? How can we go and disrupt things? How can we go and do things in a different way? Again, I go back to listening to your stories earlier, and I absolutely love the mission that you are on, putting customers right at the heart of this and saying, basically, how can we disrupt the banking sector? How can we do it in a better way? And then to see the workshops and all the different creativity, all the different ideas, saying, how do we go and do that? This, for me, sits right at the heart of the big, bold mindset. I've now written 4 books about this whole notion of the mindset needed to go and do this. And we mentioned just beforehand about prizes. So I've bought 10 copies of my latest book, which are prizes for the best questions at the end. So I'm looking forward to your questions as they come through. I hear you're a competitive bunch. Is that right? Stamp your feet if you agree. There we go. I like that. Lots of foot stamping. OK. Let me start off with a story. A story about why I think we need to think differently in our day and age. The red circle over there. There's a small set of islands just outside Panama called the San Blas Islands. There's about 360 of these small islands. We were sailing through there the second time around the world. And what I noticed, there were lots of ships that had run aground. Big ships and small ships. And I'm a curious person, and I started to look at that and say, why is that the case? What is going on here? And I started investigating. I found the charts. These were the exact charts. These were created by Captain Cook several hundred years ago. And in that moment, I suddenly realized that all these ships were trying to navigate a new world using an old set of charts. And I think it's exactly the same in business today. We can't navigate a new world using an old set of charts. We have to go out there and we have to disrupt the existing players. And we say, how do we do things differently? But so much of our mindset is tied to models, depending on when we came into the workplace 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I think we need to think very differently about the future to how we thought about the past. I already see that coming through in everything I've been hearing about what you're doing today. To me, you are epitomizing how do we go and disrupt these marketplaces. I have this model which I'm going to use to navigate through our time today. There's a lot of detail there. I'll give you all the slides if you want them. But basically, in that last book, The Big Bold Mindset, there's a set of 20 principles for what I see big, bold leaders around the world do differently, the mindsets that they apply to how do we go and achieve those goals. I'm going to simplify it, though, to these core 5 areas. And these are areas that are open to everyone. For me, leadership is not the title, it's the mindset. It's how we approach things. It's how we approach things at work. It's how we approach things at home. How do we think about that? So, in our time today, I'm going to cover just 3 of these circles and share some stories and ideas around that. And we're going to start off with this one here, this whole notion of thinking bigger. So I'd like to take you back to 2009, where I first really started to develop what I would call a big, bold mindset. Back then, I was running a small technology company. We were a data analytics firm. We weren't doing terribly well at the time, and I was working very long hours, and my home life wasn't doing terribly well either. And I remember sitting down with my wife, Nicola. In fact, let me introduce Nicola. Here she is on the screen. And we started to look at what we were doing, and we said, I wonder if there is a better, more exciting story of the future than what we are doing right now. And over a period of about 3 or 4 months, we would sit down at our kitchen table and start to really listen to each other, really understand what was driving both of us, and say, let's come up with a better story, a more exciting story of the future. We literally wrote out a vision statement for what we wanted to achieve in our lives. It's that sheet of paper you can see in front of the screen there. And part of that story was we said we wanted to go and sail around the world with our family team. Now, what happens when you come up with a big, bold story of the future? It's very easy for all the reasons to come racing into our head about why it's impossible, why that thing could never happen. Here's some of the reasons that came racing into my head. First of all, we didn't have the money. When people sometimes meet me for the first time, they say, your name's Casper, you're very British, you must have had bucket loads of money. The truth is back then, our business was losing money. I would have earned more money working at the local supermarket, stacking shelves. So it was crazy from that perspective. Nicola had been on a boat twice, and she'd been seasick both times. And on top of that, we didn't have a boat either. Lots of good reasons why it should never happen. Isn't it easy to be overwhelmed by the size of a challenge when we look at that? I wonder how many of you have ever had a really exciting idea, and by the end of the day, you've talked yourself out of it. You've become overwhelmed with all the reasons why it can't work. I believe it's those ideas we need to sit with for a bit longer to capture them. Of course, not all of them will work, but some of them, I bet you there are some gems in there if we sit with those ideas for a little bit longer and we run some experiments around those different ideas. It was the same in my workplace when we said, we're going to turn around our business and we're going to become the world's best data treasure hunters. That's what we did in the field of data analytics. We went and worked with firms to help them tell better stories so they could make better decisions. All the reasons racing into my head why it couldn't work. Not enough money, not enough people, not enough resources. Isn't it funny when we say the word not enough? The next thing that comes is another not enough. It's very easy to be overwhelmed, talk us out of those difficult challenges. So how do we think about that? How do we start to really grab hold of some of those ideas and say, what do we do with that? I want to share with you on the next slide a very, very simple technique that I've used and I still use in all the different challenges that I'm looking at when I'm trying to bring the big, bold mindset. It's a single sheet of paper. On one side, why? It's taking the time to reflect on why this mission really matters. Not just a quick reflection on it. But, I was hearing Martin talking earlier about your reason why, about, the differences that you're going to make to your customers' lives, enabling their dreams, helping them to basically live better lives because you're providing incredible financial services. For me, that's a really powerful why. And it's taking the time to reflect on what difference you can make to people's lives because of what you do. For me, that's such a powerful force when we take the time to really sit with that and think how we can make other people's lives different. And on the other side, why not? I want to know every single reason why this idea will fail. Because when I do that, that quite simply becomes my to-do list. Those are the things we're going to go and work through. You can't do them all at once. This is why you have to do it on a piece of paper rather than in your head, because the danger is we become overwhelmed with all of those different things. So for us, our reason why for our sailing adventure was to create magical, life-changing experiences for us as a family team. And then all the why nots. There were loads of them, right? No money, no boat. How do we deal with medical challenges? Again, so easy to become overwhelmed with those. But we started to say, how do we work through those one by one? I won't talk through all of them, but very briefly, we just took them one at a time, the most important ones first. The scariest one for me was medical. What happens if somebody gets sick when we're halfway around the world? The answer to that, we both went and trained to become ship's doctors, the most advanced medical training you can get outside of becoming a doctor or a nurse. We had a lot of medical equipment on board. We had a hotline to the local hospital, to a doctor. We always knew where there was another boat, where there was a doctor on board. For me, when you're going after big, bold goals, then you've got to match that with big, bold actions. And you've got to have that relentless action, trying lots of different things, running lots of different experiments, because that is the only way that you can make these things work. Now, as we're going through on our journey, both in the work journey and in the home journey, exactly the same time, what I noticed is that we kept having lots of arguments. And the argument would go something like this. Somebody would say, let's go and do this in the future. And then somebody else would say, but we've always done it that way in the past. Anyone ever heard that conversation? I certainly heard that a lot in my workplace. And what it made me reflect on is when you're going after those huge goals, that because there is no certainty, because there's lots of uncertainty, we heard from your economist earlier, the word looking at the future is around uncertainty. That means that, we're going to have to struggle well and figure out the challenges to how do we do that. And what I've noticed is the conflict is guaranteed in those arguments, but the resolution is optional. How do we struggle well to be able to solve those hard challenges together? And I ended up developing a question around this because I realized that we weren't having the same conversation. I thought I was talking about one thing, and I thought my wife was talking about something else. Let me explain a little bit more. The question I developed is called past, present, future. Quite simply, of 100% of your time, energy, and focus, what percentage gets drawn towards the future, what percentage in the present, and what percentage towards the past? So let me illustrate. When I first asked myself this question, I said I spend about 90% of my time looking at the future. I'm Mr. Big Bold Goals, right? That's where I'm looking over there. That's the exciting thing. That's what I'm driving at. About 10% in the present, and about 0% in the past. By the way, since I became aware of this, I've since changed my numbers, because having 0% in the past is hopeless, because you need to spend time looking backwards, reflecting and learning. Otherwise, you keep repeating those same mistakes. That's why self-awareness around these things is so, so important. The light bulb came on for me, though, when I asked Nicola what her numbers were. This is what she said. She said, I'm 50% focused on the past, 30% in the present, 20% in the future. Anyone see why we're arguing a lot? It's right there in the numbers, isn't it? I think we're talking about the future. She thinks we're talking about the past. No one's ever sat down and said, well, where are we actually looking? By the way, this one tool is the fundamental thing which helped to sort of really turn our marriage around and help us get really good having the same conversations again, because we became much more structured about it. And I developed this set of hats at home where I'd say, let's put the future hat on, and let's all imagine we're looking towards the future, and let's say, what does it look like out there 5 years out, 10 years out? What is that story? Now let's all put the past hat on and say, what have we learnt from the experiments we've run in the past? And then let's all finally put the present hat on. What are we going to do today? What are we going to do this week to move us towards that based on what we've learnt from that? Quite simply, it's a very simple tool for me around self-awareness, and it's removing some of the friction out of those conversations, because you're going to have to grapple with those challenges to say, how are we going to go and do this thing together? Now I wonder, will you do a small live experiment with me? Good. Okay, so would you all just think in your own minds, what are your past, present, future numbers? I'll repeat the question. Of 100% of your time, energy, and focus, what percentage goes to the future, to the present, and to the past? Everyone got a set of numbers in your head? Okay, so by show of hands, who has the biggest or the equal biggest number in the future? That looks like about 20% of the room. It's always interesting, by the way, to look around the room and see where the numbers are, because we all look at things very, very differently. Okay, biggest or equal biggest in the present? Okay, that looks like about half the room. Biggest or equal biggest in the past? Okay, that looks like about 10% of the room. So my maths is probably there or thereabouts. Isn't it interesting, right? A room full of people, we all look at things very, very differently. We've all got different time biases. They're all incredibly valuable because we need to use all of those lenses, but I believe we need to use them much more consciously. For me, this is the first part certainly in my journey, in becoming more self-aware. We all look at the world differently, and how we're going to tackle our challenges together is by having better, more constructive conversations. So for me, it was all about, okay, well, where are you looking at things? How am I looking at things? And therefore, how do we use that piece of insight to have those better conversations? It's a simple tool. I encourage you to go and have a conversation with somebody else about how they are looking at things. Work team, home team, it's exactly the same. And as I said, for me in my home life, it was a game changer just by having that piece of insight that we are aligned, but we're just talking about different things. So for me, that's that first circle, all around thinking bigger, imagining that more exciting future, which you are already doing. You're already super clear on why you're doing it and the difference you're going to make to your customers' lives. Knocking over all those why nots. And then it's making sure on that journey you're having the best conversations possible so you can move there as quickly as possible. Run those experiments to move faster into the future. The next section I want to talk about is this notion of what I call bigger resilience. You know, we've all got lots and lots of different pressures on us. There's lots of different pressures that are out there in the world at the moment. You know, we've all come through COVID. We can all see the conflicts around the world. There's lots of challenges that I think many people have these days around mental health, around the volume of different things that we have facing us. And when I think about going after big, bold goals, what I observe in all the people who do it very, very well, and what I observe in their mindset, is they deliberately, specifically, and consciously increase their levels of resilience. Because there are no certainties. You're going to get knocked back a number of different times. You're going to have to come up with different strategies, different ways to be able to move forward. So to just do what we've always done in terms of resilience, I don't believe is sufficient. We need to actively increase those resilience levels. Let me share a story of where I learnt this the first time round. By the way, the reason I share this story is that I'm fascinated by learning at the extremes. A lot of the things that I've done is I've gone to extremes. And when you go there, you have to learn very, very quickly, and then you can bring that insight back into normal day life. That first yacht race that I did, this was our route here. We started off in the UK. We sailed across to Boston in America, down the Atlantic, down to Buenos Aires in Argentina, around Cape Horn, the most feared stretch of water in the world, across to Australia, across the Indian Ocean, Cape Town, and then back up to the UK. It took us 10 months to do that. And yeah, this crew of 18 people, we had a lot of pressures and a lot of challenges. But we started off by just literally focusing on the results. People were very much the afterthought, and we were driving our boat incredibly hard. This was us leaving the UK and arriving in Boston in first place. It was an incredible moment. It was 18 days to race across the Atlantic. By the way, Martin's story earlier, as we were going across there, we had one of those massive showers coming down, and everybody ran up on deck to put all the soap on and have a wash underneath the rain, and actually the rain did stop as well, so we're all standing there covered in soap. So it was an amazing experience doing that. And that whole focus of not looking after yourself, not looking after each other, but just literally focusing on results at all costs, it works for a short period of time, right? However, by the time we're halfway around the world, by the time we get to New Zealand, a different story is starting to emerge. This is what it's starting to look like deep down in the Southern Ocean. The closest land mass is Antarctica. We're going past these icebergs, these hurricanes. We're literally being battered by these gale force winds. You can see the picture of the guy there with his arm over the side of the boat. And literally, we're just hanging on, just trying to get through. What I noticed is that we were not looking after ourselves, we were not developing our resilience, and we definitely were not looking after each other. Things started to go wrong for us because we weren't paying attention to that. We had two big guys on our boat. One guy used to play rugby for England. The other guy used to be a photographer for one of the national newspapers in England. I knew things were going wrong when these two big guys had a stand-up fist fight over who had the best bar of chocolates. Is it a Snickers? Is it a Mars bar? I don't know. But it showed me that we were not dealing very, very well with the pressure. It got worse, though. By the time we got to New Zealand, we drove our 45-ton boat into the side of another boat, this boat here, doing about 10 knots. We took both them and us out of the race. You know, things go wrong sometimes, don't they? And when they go wrong, it's stopping and saying, what is the piece of information this challenge is trying to teach me? And what I realized is that whole thing about not looking after ourselves, not developing our resilience skills, and not taking care of each other had come unstuck. it led me to reflect on this notion about what do you do every single day to put yourself in the best place possible to deal with those challenges. It made me think very deeply about what are the things that I'm doing to put myself in that best place possible. On the next slide, what I want to share with you is a single sheet of paper. And by the way, after this, I'm going to have a challenge and a dare for you as well. It's this single sheet of paper that literally holds my world in place. And if I don't follow this, then I end up in a whole bunch of trouble several weeks down the line. And when you see it, it's going to be very, very simple. What it is what I call my habits chart. I have thought long and hard about what are the different things that put me in the best place possible to deal with all those different challenges. I'm not going to let my resilience happen by accident. I'm going to take deliberate, specific, conscious control over it because I know exactly what happens when you don't take care of yourself. Everything comes unstuck. Let me explain this a little bit. By the way, this single sheet of paper, it lives on my fridge at home, and I refresh it every single week. Across the top, I have the days of the week. Very, very simple. Down the left-hand side, I have a whole stack of habits that I have slowly built up over time. I didn't start with this many. I started with a single habit. My single habit was a gratitude journal. Every evening before I went to bed, I would write down 5 things that I'm grateful for. I started doing that. I started noticing the benefits of that. I then started to add another habit, one habit at a time. The science, the research shows that on average it takes 63 days to develop a new habit. So generally, I look at doing one new habit every 90 days or so, 4 new habits a year. So what are some of the ones that I have on there? 8 hours sleep. There's a brilliant book by a guy called Professor Matthew Walker. It's called Why We Sleep, and basically analyzes the science behind sleep. It sounds so basic, right? And we probably know lots of these different things, but the reason for doing this chart, it's holding yourself accountable. It's leading yourself to make sure you're doing those right things. So you can see across that week there, 4 out of 7 days, I managed to hit my target of sleeping 8 hours a day. And again, I've just slowly built this up over time. Now, cold showers. I know they were mentioned here earlier. I'm curious, by the way, how many of you do cold showers? Okay, I reckon you are higher than average than most audiences I speak to actually from that. It's fantastic. So let me talk about cold showers for a moment. There is a whole bunch of medical evidence. I'm not a doctor, clearly, but basically shows that taking cold showers is really good for building your immunity, building the amount of white blood cells you have, your resilience levels, and all that sort of stuff. There's loads and loads of good medical reasons. The reason that I do cold showers is it's actually for my mental health and also for my resilience. Every single morning, I wake up and I walk into the bathroom. You know what it's like first thing in the morning, right? A little bit bleary-eyed. And I go in there. I did it this morning. And by the way, your water here is very cold. I go into the bathroom, turn the shower on, turn it right down, make sure it's absolutely ice cold, put my hand in. Yep, that's definitely cold. And then literally, I step in. I felt that shiver across the room then. One, I'm awake very, very quickly. But more than that, I have taken on my first hard challenge of the day. I've taken myself out of my comfort zone. I've pushed myself. Do I really want to step into a cold shower? No, it's cold, but I do it because it's uncomfortable, and I want to become more comfortable being uncomfortable, because then whatever challenge comes after that, I'm in that state. I'm in that zone. It's like, right, bring it on. What's next? And for me, this is how we deliberately, specifically, consciously start to build our resilience, by finding these different things. There's loads of other ones there. Maybe we'll pick up some of those in the Q&A. But I wonder, by a show of feet stamping, who is going to give it a go to do a habits chart and something like this? Who's going to have a go at tracking and managing your habits? Give me some feet stamping. Oh, a little bit. Okay. By a show of hands, who's going to have a go at doing some cold showers? I can see I think there's a few more hands than came up before. I think I'm going to have to work in you a little bit more. I promise you it's a really good thing. It's a really good habit to get into. I dare you all to try it for 14 days and to track this, to take this sheet of paper. I'm very happy to send you my charts and all the different things that I do. But for me, it comes back to this notion of bigger resilience. How do you deliberately, specifically take control of that? Okay. The final area I want to talk about is bigger together. By the way, I love your name, Big Bank. I don't think I've ever sort of come to an organization where it's so aligned with what I do. And literally baked into the name, isn't it? So look, bigger together. On my journey, what I have found, what I've observed, all these leaders around the world who have this mindset of going after big, bold goals, they all know that you can't do it alone. It's all about the teamwork. Let me share a story. Back in 2011, I'm in the process of trying to get our business to start to accelerate and to go and create that growth. And things are not working that well. And I'm struggling to try and get things working, trying to get the team moving together, and home team, work team, same thing. And someone suggested to me that I should go and get a coach. And back then, when someone suggested a coach, someone to hold the mirror up and tell you the things that you can't see, honestly, when someone suggested that, I crossed my arms a little bit, and it's like, I don't want to go and talk to anyone. I'm pretty good as I am, thank you. But as I thought about it, I realized that having someone to hold the mirror up to you and tell you the things that you can't see is one of the most valuable things that anyone can do, because we've all got blind spots. We've all got things that we can't see, but everyone around us can see them, right? And for me, having someone you trust to point those different things out can be so, so powerful. This is my coach, Margaret, and she pointed out to me that I was trying to do our journey on my own. I wasn't taking my team with me, home team, work team, exactly the same thing. And she shared this South African proverb with me. You can read the words. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And when she shared that with me, a light bulb went off in my head. It's like, of course, we have to do this together. We have to tap and harness all the talents within our teams. And she then started to encourage me to go and do some work on our values. And honestly, when I worked at KPMG many years ago, we had a set of values there. And I remember when anyone suggested doing those things, I crossed my arms and think, oh, you know what? This is soft, fluffy stuff. I don't get this. I'm really not interested. But as Margaret explained it to me, our values are the things that shape our behaviors. It's our behaviors that shape our actions, and it's our actions that shape our outcomes. These really are the core building block of how you go and do anything together. We ended up creating a set of values. And by the way, it's really spooky, but when I was looking at your values on your website, they were virtually identical to what our values were. So there was courage, simplicity, development, and those sorts of things. I don't remember the rest of yours, but I certainly remember those three. And for me, it wasn't just sort of defining those values, but it's how do we turn those values into a conversation every week where we start telling people what they're doing well in accordance with those values. It's not enough to have them on the wall. They've got to be part of the everyday conversations. Otherwise, they don't mean anything. And that was what we started to do. We started to have better conversations about focusing on the things we wanted to see more of, those values and those behaviors. This was one of the key things that helped us to start to turn our journey around, to start getting us accelerating fast to our goals. It was around this time that I was also thinking about how am I going to get my family team safely around the world? Because we'd started to fix the money problem, and now it's like, okay, how do we get our team together? We knew at some point, crossing an ocean, some child at some point would say, are we nearly there yet? And unless we had a good answer to that, we're going to have some troubles. So what did we do? We decided to develop values at home as well. And literally, we came up, we worked together as a family team. We created this big painting. The painting still hangs in our house today, symbolizing all of our values. You can see them there: love, go prepared, action, learn something. And again, we didn't just create those values. We turned them into a conversation every day. Every morning over breakfast, we would tell each person what they had done well, what we wanted to see more of. Too many people I know start conversations by saying, the problem is. Everyone's very good at telling you what's wrong. When it comes to building people to go and develop that big, bold mindset, to go and achieve your huge goals, it's all about building people up. And what you do is you do that by noticing the things they're doing particularly well. And for me, this links so closely to finding what our strengths are. What is the thing that each of you is uniquely brilliant at? I see an incredible amount of talent across the room in front of me here. And I know with absolute certainty that every single one of you, there will be 1, 2, 3 things which you are exceptional at doing. But what I also notice is so often we don't take the time to really understand what our strength is, what our superpower is. And I believe that it's so important to understand what that is. And when we know that, we can double down on that. Too many people say, I'm going to build this weakness up. The danger of trying to build a weakness up is that you can so often weaken a strength. And for me, it's about finding that strength and saying, okay, let's go and be much more of that. Let me share a story about how I came across this in an unusual way. It's when we're sailing across the first ocean, sailing across the Atlantic as a family team. That was our boat, by the way. And we had to start tackling the challenge of homeschooling. 2 years away, we had to go and do homeschooling. Toughest thing about the whole journey, actually. And I remember sitting down at the saloon table with my son. By the way, my son's called Columbus. It's almost like I knew we were going to sail at some point. And I set him some homework to do on the kings and queens of England. And I set him this homework to do. And I went up on deck, and I did a bit of sailing, and came down an hour later, and he was just sitting there with this blank sheet of paper in front of me with his arms crossed. And it's like, oh, okay, this isn't working. So it's like, Columbus, what's going on? He said, I'm just not interested in history. Homeschooling parents, you know what I'm talking about here, right? And so I turned around and said, what are you interested in? He said, I'm interested in fishing. It's like, okay. So we got all the books out on fish and how fast they swim, the different oceans you catch them in, and so on. And suddenly his eyes started shining, and he started coming alive because we paid attention to him. We found out what ignited him. We started catching fish. He started weighing them, measuring them, drawing beautiful pictures of them. We started dissecting them. It took us to biology lessons. He set up a business making and selling fishing lures. He's going around to all the other boats and selling these things for $5 a piece. What have we done? We've taken a little bit of time to step into his world, to find out what his superpowers were. What were the things that made his eyes shine and come alive? And when we did that, that was the thing that made all the difference. We did it with all our kids. The same process I used to do with my work team, to sit down with each individual and say, how can I ignite that brilliance in each of you? The challenge is we're all so busy, aren't we? And there's so many different things going on, but it's taken that little bit of time to say, how can I ignite every person in my team, home team, work team, exactly the same thing, right? I wonder, just think about your team at the moment. Again, doesn't matter if it's the home team or the work team. Just bring into mind, see in your mind's eye, some of those people that you spend time with. And just tell me, or just think in your heads, what difference would it make if you could help each of these people to ignite what is the thing that's particularly brilliant about them? If you could see their eyes shine and come alive, what difference would that make? All it requires is you to go and spend that little bit of time, that little bit of discovery, that little bit of paying attention to each person. If you think that would make a big difference to those people, again, at home or at work, give me a stamping of some feet. Come on, give me some. There we go. For me, that's what this is all about. The whole thing about Bigger Together is taking that time to ignite that stuff. It's finding out for yourself, what are the things that I could be doing more of? It's igniting that brilliance within you. Look, We're going to turn over to questions in a moment, and we've got the books here for prizes, so I hope there's some good questions that are coming through. But when I look at your Mission Possible, and I see the things that you have in front of you, I picture a rocket ship that is just taking off. They say that it takes about 20% of the energy of a rocket launch to go the first couple of meters, and after that, it just starts accelerating very, very quickly. When I was in here before and I was listening to the workshops and the different things, the conversations in the saunas and the Ubers and those sorts of things about how you're going to ignite all of your stuff, I see you absolutely starting to get flying with your challenge and your mission. But just think, go back to where I started with that seemingly impossible mission of saying, how are we going to get around the world as a family team? This is exactly how we did it, by thinking bigger, by developing our resilience, and saying, how do we get bigger together? I'm going to leave the final words to a brilliant person, Goethe, where he said, boldness has genius, power, and magic. I invite you all to begin it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaspar. I think it was a very interesting presentation. And maybe to start with the questions, we have a lot of them here, but I would ask one first.
Okay.
You have done a lot of remarkable things and had a lot of different and really big goals. What is your next big goal?
What is my next big bold goal? So right now I'm in the process of building 3 different businesses, one in the climate change sector, one in the mental health sector, and then one related to what I'm talking about today. So I have 3 work ones. And then at home, we have 2 more sailing adventures being planned. So one through the Northwest Passage, through the ice zone, across the top of America, and another circumnavigation with my wife. So I kind of have 5 at the moment.
Sounds good, and all of them are, I would say, big and bold goals. Nice.
Yes.
But here I will choose the questions by ratings. So the first question I have here is that big, bold goals might mean different level of boldness, complexity to different people. How to bring every person in the team you are working with towards same bold goal, if that goal feels not just possible to some?
Sorry, say that again for me.
How to bring every person in the team you are working with working toward the same bold goal, if that goal feels not just possible to some?
Okay, so basically if some people in the team don't believe that it's possible, right? So look, for me, it's spending that time getting so clear on why we're doing this and just getting everybody engaged with that. And what I often like to do is to say, well, let's just do a reality disconnect. Spend time thinking about that. And then once we're so clear on where we're going over there, then it's just looking at what we have here, how we're going to go and move forward. A favorite saying that I have around this is, if it doesn't defy the laws of physics, if somebody else has been able to do this before, then there's a way. And for me, it's about taking the time to say, okay, what are we going to try? What are all the different experiments? Something that I see with so many people who develop a big, bold mindset is they are continuously running experiments because nobody knows with certainty. So it's running lots and lots of different experiments. Some will work, some won't. But it's just trying to get that sort of curiosity fired up so we can start to say, okay, how are we going to move through on this journey together? But if it doesn't defy the laws of physics, if it's got a probability that you can do it, then you've got a shot at doing it. That's what I'd say to people who are skeptical.
Thank you. Next question. How come set of skills for home and work success are the same? How about romantic side of marriage partnership?
So it's interesting for me, that whole thing about the home skills. There's so many of the skills are what I would describe as just, basic human skills. And we so often get lost in language and different things that are going on. And, for me, the skill that helped with my marriage was just really listening and understanding, really actively listening. And so my wife would say something, it's like, okay, I just want to make sure I heard this properly, and I would repeat back to her. And so it's just, we're human beings, and understanding how the human being operates when people feel listened to, cared for. That's another one of your values, isn't it? Being cared for, right? It's those skills there. That, for me, is what ignites both teams, home team, work team. So it just goes back to the most basic human skills.
Thank you. So next question we have here is, there are always some ups and downs in life. What's your advice on thinking big and bold again when not being your best self?
Okay, so my advice on being big and bold when you're not being your best self. Look, I think the thing that I've come to realize about this is that going after big, bold goals, they are multi-year projects. You're not going to do it in 1 year. It's the marathon, not the sprint. And there are some times when you don't feel great and things aren't working. That's okay. Look after yourself, those habits charts, those resilience things. Make sure you're putting yourself in the best place possible, because there will become a time when you get back in the zone. And so therefore, it's being really self-aware and making sure you are developing those skills, because you've got to be ready for that marathon rather than the sprint.
Thank you. Then next question we have is that, isn't it so that you are starting looking for more only while you have reached a certain limit, like you did working long hours and not paying enough attention to your family? But isn't it an easy way? Question is, how to choose right way and right goal before you reach the limit?
So, look, for me, it's it goes back to that notion of experiments and then just being really, really self-aware and listening. And, I think there's often a conversation about saying, we're going to have work-life balance and everything's going to be, balanced like this in every week. There's sometimes when you go really extreme at work, and it's like, but so long as you then say, okay, I'm going to come back and make sure that everything else is in kilter. So for me, it kind of flows and it goes in phases. But it's having both of those things in mind and just listening to the messages, hearing those messages. There's a scary statistic that came out from Harvard in 2018. They researched 5,000 people. And what they showed is that only 10 to 15% of people are self-aware, which tells me that 85–90% of people are not self-aware. So therefore, I think that's a huge opportunity for anyone to become really self-aware of what's going on, so you can push hard, and then you know what's going on, and then you can back off and recover, and sort of you can manage yourself in a much better way. So for me, that self-awareness is a huge opportunity to basically out-self-aware your competition, for the want of a better phrase. That's how I think you can move forward.
Thank you. So we actually have still a load of questions, but our time is soon up. So I'm going to ask you the last question. And I know that Kaspar is staying here for a bit, so if somebody still wants to get an answer to his or her question, don't be afraid. Step to him, ask. I know he doesn't bite.
Come and talk to me.
But last, actually, it's a very good question as well. How did you stop yourself slipping back into bad habits?
Great question. By the way, actually, just to say, if anyone wants to catch up with me afterwards, then come and find me. But also, I'm very visible on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to follow up and ask me a question in the following weeks, then I'll answer every question that comes through. So, how do I avoid slipping back into bad habits? For me, it's that sheet on the wall, and it's what I would call gentle nudges. There are some weeks where I don't do those different things. And, some weeks, I don't always do my cold showers. Some weeks I'm short-slept. Some weeks I don't meditate because I'm traveling a lot and there's loads of different things happening. And for me, it's not beating myself up and giving myself a hard time. It's just nudging myself and saying, do you remember you did that piece of thinking to say these were the right things to put you in the best place possible? It's remembering to go back to that. And at home, I have another sheet of paper, and it has the numbers 1 through 52 on it. And literally, I score myself every week of the year. Oh, this week I got 60%, this week I got 90%, and so I can see that. So it's just a gentle nudge to make sure that I get back on. Because, look, I'm a human being, and sometimes my habits fall off, but it's just making sure that I go and get back to them again.
Thank you. But also, I would like to thank for this great presentation, and I really liked it, and I think kind of maybe one of the very important takeaways also for me from the presentation is that it's not only about, your work-life big goals. It's also about your, family, and also about, your partner, your children, and I liked it very much how you have set those, but the other thing also is that you have not set them yourself, but exactly you have also talked them through with your partner, what she wants to achieve, what you want to achieve as a family, and it's not only about you, but it's about, the team, so it was very, very nice. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.